And we're recording. Okay, welcome everybody. If you just got here, nothing, you haven't missed anything yet. We're just delaying a little bit for everybody to show up. And I'm going to prep my drawing surface, my painting surface, because I didn't do that yet. So, okay, I am painting small again. I'm going to do 2 on the same board. Okay, so if you didn't prep yours that way, I highly recommend you do. And you can just follow along with me real quick. You just have to print this out. So if you didn't print this out, that's a problem. Hopefully you have a printout, because this will go really quick and easy if you do. I had technical difficulties on Monday, but I think I have semi-resolved that now. We'll see. Still new to all of this, working out the kinks, despite watching multiple YouTube videos to try and figure out how to do it the right way. I still messed it up. Okay, so I'm scribbling graphite across the whole back so that it's covering all of these lines on the back side. If you've already got your board prepped and you're happy with it, then you can just ignore this right now. Take this down, trace it real quick. I'm gonna trace 2 of them real fast and we'll be ready to start. And looks like we're still waiting for a few people to show up and we'll get going. And as usual, if you want to do a similar scene but change it up a bit, go for it. Feel free to change the line of the trees as well. As we go through these things, I'm figuring out stuff that I want to do differently. I don't like the shape of the trees over here. Every time I try to paint it like that, I don't like how it turns out. So change it up however you like. These are just guidelines. You do not have to paint in every detail. This is just to remind you where things go. Hopefully you guys noticed the tree handout that was the 3rd page on the file I sent you. I think this is a great little reference. You can't really read what the tree names are real well, but you can get an idea of what different types of evergreen trees look like. And so you can try to pattern your strokes off of one of these trees to make it look more convincingly realistic. Okay, if you're just arriving, class has not officially started yet, don't worry. I'm just prepping my drawing surface, showing you how quick and easy that can be. I'm going to trace it 2 times real fast. I'm going to keep repeating myself until we're ready to start, because people keep popping on. So as I was saying a few minutes ago, if you haven't drawn 2 small versions of this on your board, I would highly suggest you do it that way. Even if you only intend on painting 1, going small will be very helpful in the beginning. When you're using small brushes, they don't hold a lot of water. And so if you try to cover a lot of ground with a small brush, it is going to be frustrating, because it will run out of water, run out of paint. before you get all the way across the page. And then certain areas will start drying before you have a chance to go back and drop more paint in and do different techniques you were trying. So you can always take a picture when it's done if you like it and blow it up and get it printed bigger. But watercolor is one of those things where you want to kind of start out small when you're first starting. That's one of my biggest tips for beginners. If you don't consider yourself a beginner and you're doing fine, then disregard everything I said. And just like Monday, I will be painting this twice, so you can watch one and paint along with the other. Okay. If we tape this down, we'll be ready to start. All you need for paints is blue, a natural blue, black, and a bright red. We are going to start practicing techniques first, a little bit like we did on Monday. So you can start mixing up a pool of those three colors, because we'll just practice with the same colors we're going to use. Make sure you got 2 cups of water. Brush is ready to go. You probably need we will need some extra little piece of paper towel or tissue, because I'm going to teach you guys a lifting off technique. And you need 1 extra piece of paper. Even when we do the turtle, we're going to still practice some techniques a little bit first on Friday. So always have that extra piece of paper ready to go. Okay, and hopefully when you all came in, give me a thumbs up if you saw this. When you came in, you're seeing the whole board really big. You didn't have to do anything, right? Yes? Okay, good. And of course, I have you guys all muted right now. So if you need to get my attention, as you noticed Monday, I don't look up that often, and so I didn't see little messages people were trying to say. So if you got a question, you might have to, you can type in a question and other participants will see it and be able to get my attention for you if you're having problems like with the audio and I can't hear you, but you really need to ask me something or alert me to something, then you can do that. So reach out and someone will see the message and either answer you or let me know that you're having trouble. Okay, board is prepped. Let's set that aside. We are ready to begin the practice for today. Okay, so we are going very light and airy. Here's a whole bunch of ones that I did. I did it 3 times a couple weeks ago because I wasn't happy about something with each of them, okay? And that is fine, that is normal, okay? So if you do not like the way yours first turned out, don't worry, you can always do it again. Like there's certain, I think I like the trees best of this one, and the mountains and the sky, but I really don't like this tree here and the way it's blending. I was going more for this look here, okay? But then I don't like what I did to the foreground, and I don't like these trees. I really don't like how dark and kind of blotchy those trees turned out, or how dark the sky turned out. Okay, so it is okay not to like the end result, all right? And it's okay to do it 3 times and still not nail it, okay? So I want you to keep all that in mind as we're trying this. Okay, but I feel like it's gonna feel more misty and cold and windy if we stay very pale and light, okay? So we wanna avoid doing something this dark, okay? That really didn't turn out well. I'm going more for this look. Okay, but again, it is completely up to you. So that's my goal for the project. You might have other goals, and that's fine. All right, let me get my paint ready. Okay, first thing we're gonna do, this involves a whole bunch of layered graded washes. Okay, so we have to learn how to blend the colors together seamlessly and learn how to fade out from a deep color and just bring it out to just the water. So that's what we're gonna try here. I am going to be using my flat brush more today for this. All right, so first thing I'm going to do blue so you guys can see that and it shows up better. This is also time to practice painting light but not too thin, okay? And that's just kind of hard to figure out. And that's one of the most frustrating things for me while I'm teaching this class is that I'm the type of instructor who I demonstrate and then I run around and I actually paint on your paper if you let me. And I help you that way, and we figure out problems together side by side. And so I can't jump through the screen and do that with you. So that is kind of frustrating. But this will be good practice for me to be better at the verbal communication here. So, all right, so I loaded my brush. That means soak up a lot of paint really well. Don't worry about if it's too light or too dark yet. And then we're going to try 2 different ways to make this fade out. I'm going to paint sort of like I'm doing the flat wash there. But every time I'm going to go over to my paper towel and get some of the paint off and get just a little bit more water. And I'm going to keep trying to get that to fade by adding thinner and thinner paint until it fades out to just water. And keep cleaning my brush so that by the time I get down to the last stroke, there's no pigment there at all. Right? And then if I lift it a little bit, that will help it want to blend down and be a little more seamless. Okay, this is called a graded wash. And it takes some time to practice and some time to get right. We're going to do this for the sky. We are going to paint the sky upside down again. I just find that easier. And you'll see, I think you'll agree in a minute. Try this a few more times, maybe with different colors. Let me try red. The pigments will act differently on the page. So if you get used to doing one color and then you try to paint with another color and you're like, it's not acting the same, sometimes that does happen. So I'm going to do that again. I'm going to go back, rinse off most of the paint. And I'm going to go clean the brush completely. So it's just water. And the goal there is to try and get those to blend and fade out to just water. Now we are having a problem with the Brilliant Red is a high staining pigment, turns out. So you see, you might not be able to see, but there's kind of a line here, and I couldn't get it to blend because it was painted really thin. It dried so fast before I even had time to go back and add more water. It had kind of already stained into the paper and made a line. So I just got to watch out for that. You can avoid that problem by painting wet on wet and trying this technique. So let's try that. For this to work well and not bleed like crazy, we don't want to have a ton of water on there, okay? So it needs to just be slightly damp. I mean, you should see absolutely no pooling of water. So paint a little rectangle or square of just water. Hold it up to the light and make sure it's staying moist but not sopping wet. Because it's already water on the paper, you may have to go thicker and heavier with paint because it's going to dilute once it hits the water. So just keep that in mind. However, for this scene, we are kind of going very light and airy. And so if it ends up being very pale, that'll be okay for this one. Okay, while it's still wet, I'm going to try the same thing. I'm dropping the paint in and then going back with just water. Okay. So that is a wet on wet graded wash. So see how we're building these skills here. We worked on wet, and we worked on flat washes. Now we're putting 2 things together to make it a little more advanced here. Okay, and let's see, on the instructions I gave you guys with the paper, remember, I highly recommend you guys print these out. Okay, look at it ahead of time or even have it sitting with you. Mine, for some reason, I didn't print. I don't know why. But I've got the basic instructions of how I did it on here that you can always use again in the future. Okay, try that another time or two, both ways. Right, and then we're going to do a graded wash where we blend two colors together. Okay, so have two pools of color mixed up. I'm going to practice with, where's my example? Yeah, I'm going to mix a purple and a blue, a light blue, and I'm going to blend those two together, going for a very light, airy feel of the sky like this one. So to mix that purple, I'm going to take mostly red and add just a touch of blue. Have some test paper nearby because you can see how my puddle looks very dark there. But when I actually paint it, it's not going to be that dark, and you'll probably start noticing that on yours as well. Okay, ooh, I like that color. It's too dark, so I just need to add more water. Pull that off over here. I'm going to make a thinner, lighter puddle. Okay, and I got a little problem here. You see this? There is some thick paint stuck up in the top of my brush. If I don't get rid of that, it's going to eventually dissolve and bleed into what I'm doing, and I'll be working on my blue sky and get a red streak. Okay, so make sure you, if that happens to you, you gotta rinse it really good. Get that blob of paint out of there. Okay, now I'll test my color again. There we go, that's better. Still might go a little lighter. All right. Okay, got a purple I'm happy with. Hopefully you do too. Now I need to get a blue I'm happy with. Okay. And you could kind of have three colors to the sky as well, but we're going to practice first here. All right. So I'm going to fade the purple into the blue. And again, we're going to try it both ways and figure out if we want to do a graded wash on dry paper, if we want to do a graded wash wet on wet. See which one works best for us. And then we'll be ready to start this painting. All right, I'm going to do on dry paper first. So I'm going to start with the purple, load the brush with purple. I'm going to start painting that almost like a flat wash, and then immediately go jump into the blue, and before the purple dries, overlap the strokes and fade that down into the blue. Okay, and if all goes well, they should bleed together very seamlessly. I painted really late, so that might be a little hard to see. One thing I'm noticing with Zoom is that the video quality is not as crisp as if I was just doing this on my iPhone. So hopefully you guys can see well enough to figure out what's going on. All right, let's try the same thing, but wet on wet. All right. And if you run out of space in your paper, just flip it over or get another piece of paper. So painting a square of just wet water first. Wet water. Water's always wet. Okay. Same thing. I'm going to start with the purple. I'm going to drop that in first. Rinse out, get the extra water off. Forgot to mention that part. Jump into the blue And then drop the blue in right beside the purple. Okay. And let that dry and see if you like it. Now you've got options for your sky. There's two different ways of doing that. Closer. Okay, the one on the left is that graded wash where it just blends seamlessly into the next color. The one over here, I did some of that wet on wet technique like we did the sky yesterday where I dropped in streaks of color. Okay, and it's very light, but you can still see the streaks. Okay, don't make your sky too dramatic and too interesting, or I feel like that's going to take away from the whole overall feel and theme of this. Okay, there's a lot going on here. And real quick, while this is drying, I'm going to talk about composition. Just super fast lesson here about that. This is following the rule of thirds and some tips to help there be movement in the project as well. So rule of thirds is basically you're just dividing your paper into 3 sections, okay? And so there should be something interesting happening in all 3, with the background taking up the middle third, the foreground taking up the lower third, and the sky or deep distance background taking up the top third. So this little composition follows that basic rule. And then you'll notice, there's I can draw. Yes, because I don't want to draw on that. I'll paint on it so you can see. There's a zigzag pattern here. So it goes like this, this, and that. Right? That pattern, and if I wanted to add an extra interest, I would probably put it up here so that my pattern would go this complete zigzag all the way down the board. What that is allowing your eye to do is not rest in one spot. Okay, if there wasn't this mountain here and I just stuck a tree like smack in the middle or right on the side, it would not have the same kind of interest. It wouldn't draw your eye in and make you want to move around the page and keep looking at the work a little bit longer. All right, so those are just 2 tips for creating a more interesting and dynamic composition. Is divide your paper into thirds and try to keep something interesting. This is mostly for landscapes, what I'm talking about right now. Try to have the foreground in the bottom third, middle, like this applies to like seascapes and stuff too, especially. And then place things and points of interest and details around the board so that there's not just one spot that your eye is drawn to. If you have at least 3, that will keep things moving around, and it will go from this kind of thing. We just had a mountain and a tree, okay? You go up to that, and no matter how nice the mountain and the tree look, you're just kind of like, it's a mountain and a tree, big deal. But you have more interest going on, and you've got maybe 2 mountains, and we've got a nice sunset, and we've got trees off center and something else happening in this corner. Suddenly, even if it's not painted nearly as well as the one on the right, you'll come up to this picture and be like, wow, there's so many things to look at. You'll stay longer. It'll draw you in a little bit more. Okay. All right. I think we might be done with practicing. Oh no, there's one more thing I want you to practice. Okay, the tree line. It's a graded wash as well. It fades into just water, this first tree line. We're going to practice it real quick before we start putting these pieces together. So what I want you to do is use a small round brush for this one. All right, and I'm going to use just black right now so you can see it. It'll show up really well. All right, and what you're going to do is staying on the tiptoe of the brush. Okay, so we're not pressing it all the way down and making big fat lines like this. You're going to stay on the tip. You are going to create just these little implied little wiggly tree lines. Okay, it's off far in the distance, so it doesn't have to have much detail. And the key is going to be to paint this quickly so that we can go back over here and not have a hard line. And I'm rinsing my brush out, and this does go fast. Okay. And then I'm blending that up into the tree line, and pulling it out into the water. Trying not to get that hard line there. Okay, let's try that again. That's a little complicated and it has to go quick. Load your brush again with some gray water, and gray paint. It doesn't have to be gray. All right, paint a little squiggly tree line again. Okay, keep it kind of rough and interesting and varied. That'll make it look more realistic. And you can see why painting small is going to help you on this. If you're trying to do this real big, it's not going to work as well. Now, before it dries, I'm going back over here real fast. I gotta move quick, or else I'm going to get harsh lines that I don't want. And just blending that out to the water. Okay, that takes a little while to master correctly. Okay, so let's try it a few more times, and then we're going to start the painting. For some reason, when I do this demo, I like to go right to left for that tree line. I don't know why. So I'm going to go that direction on this one. Now the key to getting that to blend correctly is don't let this dry. It cannot dry. If it dries, we lose the whole opportunity. Now there is a trick to making that blend a little faster and not have to worry about it drying. And that would be to do a half wet, half dry blend. That's not what it's called. I don't know what the name of it's called. But it's basically where I would paint some water here first. Then I would bring the tree line down to meet it so that when it touches in, there's already water there. So it won't create the hard line. Okay, it's a little more advanced technique. But if it clicks, you might find it useful. So let's try that. So I'm going to paint some water down here first. Now the key is it can't be sopping wet. It just needs to be damp. Okay, so that's just damp. Now I go in, load my brush with the tree color. And I'll start over here. And then doing that line again. And going back. Pulling it down, and there's water already there, ready to meet me. And so that can be helpful because now I've already got a nice soft line. You may get a softer blend that you're looking for because we want it to look like it's kind of fading into mist. Okay. Or is that terribly confusing, or how's it going? Thumbs up if we're okay right now. All right.
My first one turned out best.
Okay. All right. Okay, so now you know 2 ways to try that. So I'm going to leave it up to you about whether you want to add the water at the bottom to get it to blend smoother, or try the first techniques we did. Okay, well, we'll see. Your choice. All right. Real painting time. Here we go. And I'll repeat it one more time. Paint small. Okay, you will thank me later. You can always paint big later. If you aren't painting small today, oh, for the turtle, especially for the turtle, print out the turtle and trace it the exact size of the printout that I gave you. Okay, you could shrink it a tiny bit or make it a little bit bigger, but stay roughly of that size. Okay, sky first. I'm going to flip my board upside down and move the water out of the way. I am using my flat brush, rinsing it in the water. I am going to do, I'll do both techniques since I have both here. Okay, so the first one I'm going to do is going to be on dry paper. So I'm not doing the wet on wet. I need, whoop, lost my purple. Got to mix up some more purple again. Okay, I've got my blue ready to go. The reason I turn this upside down is because I want to get a nice crisp edge along the mountains and blend out from there. So starting with my light purple. And starting off the page, I'm going to go right along the edge of the mountain. And you got to do nice quick strokes. And then I'm going to go back here, pull that across. And then before it dries, I'm going to add a little bit of water first so it doesn't dry. Shake that off. Go back in with the blue. Okay, and if I don't like the lines I'm getting there, I can go over it a few times. The advice I gave you guys to use the brilliant red might have been bad advice because it is a staining color. I don't know what's going on there. Okay, that's okay. Once it dries, it will get rid of those streaks, I think. Okay, so you see, you gotta move quick in watercolor, especially when you're using small brushes. So that's why we gotta paint small. If you are working big, then you gotta use much larger brushes and you gotta mix up a lot more paint. All right, I'm gonna do the second one over here. Remember, don't panic and don't rush, okay? If you are still working on your first one, no problem. I'm gonna do the second one over here. I'm gonna do the wet on wet technique. So I'm going to paint the whole thing up to the mountain edge with water first. Watercolor painting, to do it well, does need a little bit of kind of confidence and speed in your strokes. And so that just takes some time to build, okay? So my advice is just let it go. Right? Have fun, okay? Move quick. It'll probably go better for you than if you move too slow. Okay, again, challenging if you're a perfectionist, challenging if you're new to watercolor. But watercolor is not that expensive. So you can just have fun with it, try it. If it doesn't work, try it again. Okay, ooh, I like how it's blending better wet on wet. That is personally working better for me here. Yeah, I think I'm gonna end up liking the one on the right a lot better. You see how there's less streaking? Maybe you can't see. Yeah, it's a little hard to see, but there, believe me, there is less streaking on the one on the left than the one on the right. Okay, but regardless, my sky is done now. We'll flip it back around this way. And if I forget and I pull my board way off to the side, that happens sometimes, let me know. I'm trying to remember to keep it in the middle here. All right, now we're not gonna paint the shadows on the mountain just yet, because if we do that before the sky is dry, as soon as the edge of the mountain shadows taps into the sky, they could start to bleed and blend together, and we don't want that. So we gotta make sure they are completely dry. So we can do this tree line while we wait for those to dry. So that background faded tree line, we're gonna start with that. On the left, I'm gonna do the graded wash on dry paper, and on the right, we'll do it on wet paper. Okay, rinsing my brush. Oh, I didn't mix up a gray. Okay, so the gray I'm gonna mix for the trees needs to still have a blue tint to it. Okay, so we're going pale gray, but we don't want it to just be black. That's gonna look so out of place and unnatural. So find a bluish gray and make it pretty pale. This is supposed to be like a more, I feel like this scene is kind of a morning after a snowstorm just ended, so everything's kind of foggy and misty. So those trees can be very, very light in the background. We don't want them to be the center of focus. We want your eye to be drawn to them and appreciate them, but not dwell on it to the point you're like, why are they so dark? Okay. You kind of can't go too light for this, I feel like, because if they're kind of very understated, that'll be fine. All right, you can paint straight through the drawings of the big trees. Okay, so don't worry about them. All right, here we go. I'm gonna do my rough little tree line. I'm using the very tip of my brush to create all those little pointy shapes. The more varied and uneven things look, the more realistic. Okay, going back down. And then before it dries, rinse your brush quick. Get just water. Go on that line and fade it out. Okay, and that may or may not work. We'll see. You'll see what, yeah, what's starting to happen here, again, it's hard to tell in the Zoom video, is I had so much water in this brush that now it's going to create like this little line that's pushing the paint away. I'm going to leave it though. There are happy accidents that happen in watercolor and you're like, oh, that looks really cool. And you can tell it was done with watercolor. They're called blooms. When, yeah, this is going to create some pretty interesting blooms. When you have almost dry paint, but it's still slightly damp, and then you've got really wet paint introduced to that, it will create this little cauliflower look. And they'll have like these wrinkled edges around the side, and they're referred to as blooms. And sometimes watercolor artists are going for that effect and want that, and it can be really cool in watercolor because it's obvious that you used water, and then they'll even do that on purpose. Other times people will be going for a very smooth effect, and that will be considered a mistake. Right, so it just depends on what your goal is. Okay, the one on the right here, I'm going to paint the bottom of the tree line with just water first, like where the base of the trees would be, so that it's slightly damp. Okay, loading my brush with the gray paint again. And same thing, except it's going to naturally blend better into the water because the water is already there. Another reason I would love for you guys to have had 2 of these on your board is because you can try both techniques and try them quickly. Remember, this is all about learning. We are not trying to create a masterpiece here. Not yet. We are just trying to build skills. Ooh, see, I like that a whole lot better. Yes, that's more the look I'm going for. All right, now we leave our trees alone and let them dry. And Mr. Litzinger's back here over my head again with the shutter. So you're gonna hear clicking. Okay, how are we doing? Everybody caught up to this point so far? Alrighty. What are we doing next? Okay, our sky should definitely be dry. Okay, test that with the back of your finger. If it's not, then you're probably painting too wet. You're using a little too much water. So hopefully at least the mountain edge is dry. You need it.
Should it be at least somewhat cool? Would that be dry enough?
Yes, yes, we're going for the cool direction, which is why I chose purple instead of just like straight pink or red.
No, I mean the water.
Oh, the water. I thought you were talking about the cool tone of everything.
Yeah, no.
Cool to touch, or are you talking about the temperature of your water?
I'm when testing if my thing's dry.
If it feels very cool to the touch, even if it doesn't feel wet, it's still probably a little damp. Okay, if you're not feeling a temperature difference between the dry and the wet, then it's okay.
All right.
All right. Okay, so we need a very, very pale blue, and Hannah mentioning cool reminded me that we're going for cool tones here, okay? So that's why I wanted you to mix blue with your gray so that it had a blue undertone and it wasn't just a shade of black. All right, we need to mix a very, very pale blue, enough that it shows up, but not so much that it's gonna take over your picture. Okay, I'm happy with that. All right, So I got my pale, pale blue, very dusty blue. I'm gonna start with the one on the left again. And we're not, these are just gonna be like flat washes, okay? We're not fading them into anything, so you're just trying to like a coloring book, fill in the little shadow areas. So hopefully on your drawing you can see the shadows well enough. I'm just gonna paint one in right here, going right up to the edge of the skyline and just filling in. I'm painting around the outside edge first, and then I'm gonna go back in and fill in, just like if you were doing a coloring book. I've got paint pooling. I'm gonna dry off my brush and go back in and suck up some of the extra water. Try to get it to blend nice and smooth. All right. I just used, I had my brush a little too loaded for how small that area is. All right, next area. On the second one, I'm going to tell you a little bit different way you can try this. This one, I'm focusing on the drawing. I'm trying to stay within the drawing lines. But when I've done this in class with students, we actually did this whole thing without drawing at all. And I think sometimes the results turned out better because everything looked a little looser and more airy, rather than like we were trying to force ourselves to stay within certain lines. But I know not having a drawing freaks people out. I think in the future, if I teach this, we'll do one with the drawing and we'll do one without, side by side. Okay. Now, mountains on the right side here. I'm gonna do it and ignore the drawing. Okay, in fact, I'm just gonna erase them. Let me do that real quick. I'm gonna erase those lines. I love kneaded erasers because they will not leave any little pieces behind. And I won't tear your paper up. Okay, so all my lines are gone. Scary. Not really. Okay, got my light blue ready to go again. This time, I'm going to stay just on the left side of each mountain, but I'm not going to worry about trying to fill in any particular lines. I'm just going to add some shadows wherever I feel like adding shadows. Just keep them kind of loose and wiggly looking, and have their edges varied and they're very organic looking. You know, I'm not going for a cartoon look here. We want to look realistic. Okay, and you might discover that that technique works better for you. Okay, so finish up your mountains however you like. There's also a shadow here in the middle. Again, I'm going to erase the one on the right. These lines are a guide. Remember, this is not a coloring book. This is just to remind you where things go. Okay. I'm going to make that, the shadows on the lower part of the mountain, a little bit paler, just a bit. Okay, this one I'm going to fill in like a coloring book. Staying on the edge. And then going back into the center. Pull it all together. With watercolor, sometimes trying to stay that tight, just, you know, it doesn't always work very well because it's water, and water has a mind of its own. The fewer brushstrokes you make in watercolor, the better. And that takes some time to get used to. That's why people either like love or hate watercolor. I feel like there's almost no in between. But you can't decide that you hate it yet, okay? You got to give it a little more time. Okay, over here on the right, I'm just playing. I am adding some more shadows. I'm blending and fading this one out a bit. Okay, you do not have to do that, but I am just fidgeting here for a minute. Adding a few little spots. I might like that later, I might not. We'll see. Okay, now you need to stop painting your mountains soon on at least one of them if you're painting two, okay? Because we need to make sure that everything dries so that we can now put the trees on top and be done on time. Looks like we're actually going to go to the top of the hour today, so hopefully that won't bother anybody. All right, my tree line is dry. Yep. And my mountain shadows are not touching the tree, the big tree line. So I'm good to go. Except I don't have my gray mixed up. Okay, not quite ready. Good. I'm gonna use my bigger round brush because I need to cover more ground a little faster. Oh, and that would have been a tip I should have mentioned earlier, that if you are painting larger, you would not have wanted to try to do these tree lines with a tiny brush. That would, you might have figured that out already. You would want to use a bigger brush. All right, mixing up the same kind of gray that I used for these trees, but just a hair darker. Still lighter than the ones I did in the example. Like, especially this one. I feel like those foreground trees are too dark. I don't want to go that dark this time. I want to go much lighter. And I'm out of blue paint, so I need some more. Okay, and I'm running out of test paper. Here's some more. Okay. Whoa, too dark. Way, way too dark. So I'm creating a puddle of just dirty water over here, and I'm gonna just load my brush in that gray I mixed and just pull over little bits at a time. I'm not gonna start from scratch. I'm just gonna water down what I already created. And I feel like that's not blue enough. So I'm gonna add just a touch more blue. Maybe a touch more than that. So we want a definite blue-gray. There. Now the key is it does have to be dark enough to cover your original tree line. So however dark you did your first middle ground tree line, we need to be a little darker than that. All right. I find color mixing fun. You might be finding this very frustrating or boring, but and you might not be seeing like a whole lot of color difference between all these tones, but I do. And I'm just trying to get the perfect match for what I'm envisioning. Okay. Okay, so I need a loaded brush. And this time we're not blending anything. We want it to stay dark on the tree from top to bottom. I'm going to lift the board a little bit so that if it does start to bleed and run, it's going to run down. And I'm going to start at the top of the tree. And here's where you have to decide what kind of tree you're going for. Okay, you could go for just a very stylized basic tree, or you could try to make it look much more realistic. Okay, I'm going to do both. First one, I'm going to go quick and more stylized, and on the right, I will go a little more detailed. Okay, the quick and stylized is a little bit more like how we did the first tree line. And I have to stay on the tip toe of the brush so I can get little tiny branches. Okay, and you may hate this technique because it's not going to make the trees look real, very realistic. Okay, I'm gonna do the same thing on the one on the right. But again, you'll notice watercolor artists often go very loose, very sloppy looking, very stylized, because watercolor can. And you're allowed to get away with that. It's part of the nature of this medium. A lot of people only paint that way. If you come to watercolor thinking that you're gonna make it go super realistic looking from the start, okay, which is how I approached watercolor as a kid, it frustrated me to no end. And I thought I really didn't like it for the longest time. I'm still to this day trying to fully embrace the more fluid nature that watercolor can provide. But I can honestly say I love it now. Okay, and then I'm just gonna blend those trees out, paint the whole bottom gray. Okay, I'm gonna let that dry a minute. We can go back and we can add darker details and shadows and little rocks and branches and stuff if we want to later. Okay, I'm gonna let that one dry. And I'm going to do a more realistic looking tree over here. This brush, even though it says size 8, it's acting more like a 12. Okay, it's really big in this brand. And I can't get the tiny little details I wanted. So I'm gonna switch back down to a smaller brush. And I'm going to go just a tad bit darker than this gray for the technique I'm gonna try here. Still keeping it on the cold blue direction. I haven't given this lecture yet to you guys, and those of you who had me in class already know this, but shadows are rarely, if ever, black. Okay, there's very few things in nature that are jet black, which is why one major reason we don't use black straight out of the tube. We always add some color to it. Shadows reflect the colors around them. Start paying attention to that if you haven't already. It's rare, very rare to see a jet black shadow. Or jet black anything in nature. Okay. Now, I like how this artist did her trees. I have a little example here. Zoom up so you can see that. It's kind of hard to see the tiny detail. Her trees there on the left look much more realistic from a distance than this first one that I just painted. So I'm going to try and go with that look for this one. All right. And so it's going to be, I'm going to do these choppy little strokes. It's going to look very different. So painting small and tiny, and I'm doing more of these little wispy branches. Okay, now don't make these look like perfect manicured, Christmas trees, because they are wild trees. All right, so they can have missing branches. They can have really rough, crazy, gnarly looking branches. And that is okay, because you're not going to see a trimmed Christmas tree out in the woods by itself. You can even kind of make them a little crooked and leaning to one side. It'll just give your eye that whole impression of feeling more legit, more real, because we just intuitively know we're not going to see perfectly trimmed and manicured trees out in the wild. Okay, so you see these little, I'm doing these itty bitty choppy little brush strokes to get this look. And pine trees out in the wild often have like that one crazy little tiny shoot at the top. Okay, so I might like how that looks better in the end. Certain areas are pooling a little bit, and that's just going to create some interest and some depth. And so some areas will look a little darker than others in the end. That'll be okay. All right, I'm going to do the two on the right. And then there's one more thing I want you guys to practice before we start the turtle on Friday. So I'll explain that, and we can maybe try it real quick. And you see the approach that I'm taking for these types of trees takes longer, but you do get a nicer result. I am purposely leaving little pockets of white coming through, because that'll look like the snow and the light shining through the branches like it would in reality. Resist trying to fill in the whole thing. And remember, keep in mind that things are going to dry lighter. So at first you think, this is too dark. It will probably dry lighter. And then if you want to go back in and add darker spots to make it look like shadows, you can. Okay, almost done with this tree. And we're going to talk about foreground, and then we'll be done. All right, for the foreground, I'm going to use that same gray color I've been using for the trees. Paint a rough edge, and then I'm going to fade that into just water. And it's okay if it looks a little rougher, because it is closer to you. You would be seeing more things like little grasses, twigs, rocks coming through. Okay, once that dries, it has to dry completely. I would add some rocks and grasses and stuff on top. So while that one dries, I'll come try it over here. Then I'm going to quickly talk about what I want you to practice for the turtle. And then I'll see you on Friday. Okay, using a round brush that has a nice point and a tip, you can go back in and too dark. You could add some rocks. You could add some little grassy, brushy type things, right? You could do that dry brush technique where you get most of the water off and you just drag the side of the brush along. Okay, so you could add some darker shadows. These are all optional things. You might just want to leave it nice, clean, and simple and look like fresh snow. Within the trees, you can go back in now and you could add a darker layer to add more depth. Okay, this looks really dark, but it's going to dry lighter. That will imply shadows a little bit more on the trees. Okay, so just play with that, have fun. See what works for you. It may be that all of that messing we did is just now distracting. And over here it looks cleaner and simpler. Right? Totally up to you. Okay, I am happy with both of those. I think I'm going to do a little bit of a dry brush at the risk of ruining it. Yeah. Ooh, there we go. Get the dry brush right. So we're dragging it along the side here. We can create some nice rough foreground texture without even trying too hard. Okay, I'm done with that. Make sure the edges are all dry before you pull the tape away. Okay, and then the thing I want you guys to practice a little bit today, and we'll practice it again on Friday as well, but the turtle is going to encompass all of these skills together, but we also need to be able to paint tiny, tiny little spots and control them. Okay, so you're going to use one of your smallest brushes for that. And just, so if you're at a good stopping point on your mountain scene, you take a break a second. We are a few minutes over, so if you must leave, I will understand. If you can hang with me, that'd be great. Okay, so all the little markings on the turtle, on the flippers in its head, they're these itty bitty, move this out of the way. So these itty bitty little spots. We are not going to draw them all in, okay? You're going to just freehand it. But what I want you to do is practice painting random little interlocking shapes. None of them are perfectly square. They're not triangles, they're not squares or anything. They are such random little scaly shapes. You want to practice being able to control it to the point that you can lay these little spots right down beside each other with just a little bit of tiny white space between them. Okay? So it should look something like that. All right, so you just want to play for a few minutes. Keep working on that, because then when we start the turtle, it'll be less frustrating and we won't have this kind of thing happen where you get so close that before you know it, all your little spots start bleeding and blending together. We want itty bitty little white spaces showing between all those, I don't know what they are, scales, whatever they're called. Okay. I think that's it. Any questions? How are we doing out there? You guys can turn your mics on if you want to chat or say anything. Oh no, Samuel, what's the thumbs down? See, I wish I could jump through the screen and work right beside you.
My kneading eraser ripped and caused paper to bundle.
Your eraser, your kneaded eraser did that?
Yep.
You might need
I went to go and erase some of the lines for the mountains, and now I have.
Was the paper wet?
Probably still.
Okay, if the paper was wet and you take any type of eraser to it, that could be a problem. Sorry about that. Samuel, why the thumbs down?
My sky got really bad and I can't do shadows.
Well, this was the first try. This was the first time. Okay, you can do it again. You saw how I did it. Like this is like the 10th time I painted this between all the different classes I've done with this project the last couple of years, and it took me 3 tries to do all of these, and I still didn't get one I was really happy with. Okay, so don't judge yourself harshly. Does anybody want to share what they did? Anyone want to show me? Ooh,
Okay.
Cassie, very nice. Did you try both techniques on each side? You were trying different things each time?
Yeah, I did both like you.
Okay, from a distance, I like the one on the right the most, I think. Oh, and you nailed getting those nice, light, airy colors. I like that.
This thing looks better on my phone than it does in real life. I only did the
Yours looks
I
like
didn't try the
really
wet on wet stuff.
That's the look I was going for. It's always sort of getting to look very misty. And Stacy, what's your son's name? I don't know. Oh, you're still muted.
Joshua?
Joshua. Hi, Joshua. Those look so awesome. These turned out really well.
Thank you.
I'm so proud of you guys. And I know, Sam, you don't want me to see yours right now. Okay. That's okay. If you're having trouble, you can always send me a picture. Okay, I will not post it. I'm not going to show it to anyone. You can send me a picture of what you did, so I can see better what happened, I might be able to give you some tips. All right, and there's several people on here who are not sharing their video. I see Joseph, I see Laurel. We're missing a few people today. So hi, Joseph, and hi, Laurel. If you guys want to send me a picture of yours, that'd be awesome so I could see what's going on. All right, and I'm going to stop the recording now. I should have already stopped that.